have a very special guest. As drummer of the classic 60s band the Yardbirds, Jim McCarty played on iconic hits like Heart Full of Soul, For Your Love, The Shape of Things, and many others. The Yardbirds' music was at the crossroads of classic British blues, which influenced countless other bands both in the UK and US. With members including star guitar players Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jeff Beck, the Yardbirds created timeless music which led to international recognition, world tours, 6 studio albums, and their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992. Jim also is at the forefront of the genre now called prog rock by co-forming the band Renaissance with fellow Yardbirds member Keith Relf. Renaissance also found success on both sides of the Atlantic by producing music that blended English folk, rock, and classical elements, the influence of which can still be heard in the recordings of Yes, Genesis, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Renaissance later reformed with singer Annie Haslam and guitar player-songwriter Mike Dunford to find further success. In 2020, Jim lost his beloved wife and partner of many years, Lizzie, due to cancer. Jim and Lizzie shared an abiding interest in spirituality and pursued teachings in the areas of Buddhism, trips to ashrams in India, and sessions with spiritual leaders, authors, and mediums. The devastating loss of Lizzie intensified Jim's quest further into spirituality. In his most recent book, She Walks in Beauty, Jim writes of his time in the Yardbirds, Renaissance, and other musical projects against a backdrop of his quest to uncover answers to the nature of existence and life's deeper meanings. I'm indeed fortunate that Jim was so generous sharing his time and insights in what you're about to hear as a unique and examined life in music, spirituality, and finding, then losing, his true love to cancer. Links to Jim's website, books, and his music, past and current, can be found in the description below. I very much encourage you to check them out. I'm National Widowers Organization board member Ken Levy, and proud to present an interview with Jim McCarty. So, Jim, you talk in your book about threads of people's lives. What do you mean by the threads of people's lives?
Well, I guess the thread was this thread of sort of a thread of paranormal activity that ran through my life. You know, that was slightly larger than life, slightly unusual that I'd noticed, but it wasn't so dramatic, really. I didn't really meet it full on until Lizzie died, of course. But there was always that thread of something interesting going on somewhere that you couldn't put your finger on.
Right. So can you tell me your what fed your interest in the realm of things unseen?
I don't know. I got very interested, and I was particularly interested with Keith Relf. He was the singer of the Yardbirds, and we were very close. And we I don't know. We talked about it a lot. You know, we got into all those subjects on the road and explored all that stuff. And yeah, I suppose we had sort of strange things happen to us, but nothing really you couldn't explain. I mean, it wasn't unexplained phenomena, so to speak.
But you had a sense of something. In your book, you recount early recollections about your time in Teddington, in England, a place I'm somewhat familiar with. My first knowledge of Teddington, however, came in the famous Monty Python skit, the Teddington Locks of the famous fish slapping dance with Michael Palin and John Cleese. If you know that chestnut.
Yeah, I don't know if I was aware of that. Was it really? I didn't know that. That's funny.
That was that's. I think Michael Palin says that was one of his favorite Python skits of all time. But you write about how you had like an early interest in things unseen or spiritual. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. We started. I suppose it was in the 60s. You know, we started to get involved with being interested in UFOs and all that stuff. And well, I think you mentioned it, the von Daniken book, what was it called, Chariots of the Gods or something.
Yes.
and then when I was a bit older, I had a bit of a bad time at one point in the group, and I took some LSD, and it didn't agree with me, and I was very depressed for a while, for several months. And I got involved in sort of healing. I got introduced to people that could heal me, and they would take me to all these spiritual places. And there was a place in London called the Spiritualist Association, and they used to have people getting up and talking and channeling. Basically, it was channeling. They get up on stage. There'd be a room with a stage in it, and about maybe a couple of hundred people, and they'd get up on stage and they'd channel an entity, a sort of like a wise man or a Chinese person, and they'd talk for about an hour, and it was so interesting. They'd talk about deep things and spiritual things, and I was so fascinated with it. And then I got involved in something called the White Eagle Lodge, which was also in London, and it was actually based around the teachings of a native Indian guy, a guy called White Eagle. And I guess that was a sort of channeled thing. And they used to do healing services, and you could go and you could get healing from them, and they'd put their hands on you and all this. And then I sat in a group, and we used to sit 6 people in a group, and we'd have a list of people like that needed healing, and we send colors to all their chakras. Like they say, oh, well, we send bright blue to their throat, or we send green to their solar plexus, and it seemed to work. And they said, oh, we've had good feedback, from all these people. They all feel better. So I did that for a while, and I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, that's all fascinating stuff. I guess it deals with chakras and aura and things of that. Reiki, I think, maybe part of that as well.
Yes.
You speak of like signs since Lizzie passed. When did you first get those signs, and did you see it as a confirmation of her presence, or just a sort of slow realization that those, in fact, were possible signs?
Well, of course, it was a devastating thing, as to lose your very close wife. And we've been together for about over 20 years. It wasn't my first wife, but we were very, very close, and we used to be interested in all that channeling and stuff as well. So we do it together. So we had that sort of closeness in that respect. And when she died, I sort of didn't believe that she could go anywhere. She has to be around somewhere. She can't just disappear. And I studied. I think I told you before. I studied near-death experiences, and people like Eben Alexander talking about his near-death experience, and I did sort of courses, and then I pursued some mediumship courses with a woman called Suzanne Giesman, who I still follow. She's in the States, and eventually I got a reading with her. I jumped the list somehow or other, probably because I was in the group or something, and she picked up Lizzie really well, and she said to me, "Oh, your wife said you've written a song for her," and And I said, oh, yeah, well, I suppose I have really. Yes, I did have a song in the can that I'd written about it. And she said, oh, I'd like to hear that because she's quite a forceful person, Suzanne. So I sent her the MP3 of the song, and she said, oh, yes, you've really got that there. It's really nice. So I pursued it, and I had it released. It was called Breath of the Wind. And so, if you want to hear that, it's on Spotify and all that. And I think it really does, give that feeling of my experience. And then I had some other experiences. For instance, we used to be, Lizzie and I used to go to a place about 20 minutes from here. It's right up in the hills, and it's a very remote place. And we used to love it because it was so clear and clean and very high up. And we used to go to a little cafe, and she used to talk to the woman that ran it. She was a French person, and she got very friendly with this woman. And so after she passed, I went up. I thought, I go up there and have a coffee, And I saw this woman, Catherine, in the cafe, and she said, "Oh, interesting." She said, I was coming in one day and I saw you and Lizzie walking as you do, and you were walking, on one of the paths." And she said, "Lizzie was very happy, but you weren't." She said you were in tears, and she said I came back into the cafe, and I heard that she'd passed. So she must have seen her after she died, which is really a very, very strange story. But there was no reason she was telling me that for no reason. I mean, it sort of made sense. I thought, oh, she must have seen us in some light or other, and she must have seen Lizzie as she is now.
And she had like no particular gift that she espoused or something to have like any kind of mediumship involved with her past experience?
I didn't know her that well. I mean, she would just ran this sort of cafe, but I guess she was she was from this area, and she was quite an earthly person. I guess maybe she had that sort of power, but she wasn't. She just told me very, very straightly, not she wasn't trying to make a big thing of it.
How did that affect you? How did that affect you when she mentioned it to you? That must have been quite.
Yeah. I mean, it was quite a mind blower. I thought, oh, that's amazing. And that sort of got me going, because I thought, oh, well, there we are. She is around somewhere. She's been seen.
Right. You mentioned the two people, Eben Alexander, who's a noted neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience, very profound one. He wrote this book, Proof of Heaven, was it called?
Yeah.
And this, is it Suzanne Geisman that you mentioned as well?
Geisman, yeah.
She was a former military person, as I recall.
She was in she was in very high up in the U.S. Navy.
So these are very credible people that have written extensively about their spiritual experiences.
Yes.
And you were speaking earlier, of course, about different other channels as far as like chakras and things like that. There's also research going on by a guy called Sam Parnia, and he's with the NYU Grossman School of Medicine that's doing research into near-death experiences. Do you think that science is catching up with spirituality?
Well, I was quite amazed to see all this stuff that was on the net, because I didn't know anything about it, and Lizzie and I both studied death. We'd both been through sort of Buddhist studies, and they studied death, but it was nothing like the reality of what it was. And I thought there's a whole culture, and the more I got into it, the deeper it went.
It's a big rabbit hole, to be sure.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. Really
So
is.
you were talking also in the book about certain signs, and if I could just tell you briefly, my story is the day that my Sheila passed away. She was in an intensive care ward, and I had gotten the call early morning that she had passed. And as you say, it's one thing to speak about death to your spouse in the abstract. It's another thing to actually be present with it. It's a whole different
Mm.
dimension. So obviously I was a train wreck. And I had spent time with her in the ICU, with her being there past in the bed still with all the central lines taken out. When I went down to the lobby with my parents in the hospital, Sheila and I got married to the Pretenders song, I'll Stand By You. This was before it became popular with G.I. Jane movie with, I forgot the actress.
Yeah,
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 was more of an underground hit. So I always like the sentiment of that song. So it was our wedding song. When I was down in the lobby, the hospital tannoy, the PA system, guess what it was playing? I'll Stand By.
yeah. Come on.
I'm getting goosebumps just talking about that now. It's something that I can never get out of my head. If I go back to that scene, it's remarkable. But you've gotten other signs like from Lizzie that you said as far as like birds or feathers, and I know that some other widowers that we've been in touch with express signs in the form of butterflies and things like that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. That was very prevalent. I got a lot of I got a lot of butterflies coming in on the terrace here, and also a lot of birds would be on the terrace, and it was unusual. I haven't seen them for a while, but the little birds sometimes would come in and spend the night, on the terrace, and I used to think, no, that bird's there all night. That's very unusual. And I remember when she was she died in a coma. And when she was in a coma a few days before she died, because I was talking to her all the time, there was a bird that was trying to get in the window, and it was pecking on the window trying to get in. And I was saying to her, "Oh my God, there's a bird that's trying to get in the window. I've never seen that before." No, she obviously heard me in her coma. Um, but there were a few other stories because Suzanne always says she's an evidential medium, which means that she requires hard evidence that she wouldn't know if she's doing a session with someone. She needs to get evidence from the people of the past. So she said, "Oh, you always ask for evidence," and so I got into a thing where I still do. Every morning I sit downstairs and I talk to Lizzie, and I write things down in the book sometimes. And one day I was speaking to someone that works for us in America called Mariah. She's like a tour manager. She lives in California. And I said to Lizzie, "Well, tell me something about Mariah that I don't know." And I saw this skipping rope, a woman skipping in my mind. So I called up Mariah later that day, and I had a chat with her about the business and stuff. And then at the end, I said, "Oh, by the way, Mariah, do you do skipping at all?" And she said, "Oh, well, not really. I mean, I used to as a kid. And I said, "Well, funny enough, I got something to do with skipping with you." And then she said, "Oh, hold on a minute." She said, "I'm a big Salvador Dali fan. And Salvador Dali, in a lot of his paintings, used to put a woman skipping. in the corner, like Alice in Wonderland or whatever, skipping. And she said, I've actually done a tribute to Dali, which is on my wall right here behind me. And it was a picture of a woman skipping. And I had no idea, it was like something I wasn't familiar with at all. The skipping was Salvador Dali, and it was such a lovely story.
These are such reaffirming things when, it seems to be too great a possible coincidence for these sort of things to occur. So I think that for you and myself and for all our fellow widowers, it's a very reaffirming thing that, we can get on some channel to communicate with those who have passed.
But
Because there's that two schools of thought, that it's either lights out or there's a continuation of consciousness. Do you think there's some sort of middle ground, or do you think there are always opposable thoughts? Because you write in the book, I'll just add one quick thing. You write in the book about this didactic idea as to whether to believe or not believe. So it's difficult as humans for us to square that, I think, sometimes.
Well, you're going between the different sides of your brain, the left and the right brain. Interesting that both those people, Eben Alexander and Suzanne, are both sort of quite heavily left brain, because one was a scientist and one was an officer in the US Navy, but they've got the right brain as well. And that's very interesting. But I would say, consciousness, they've been talking about consciousness going on for ages, haven't they? And all the old scripts and in the Bible and everything. I mean, if you study the Bible, some of Jesus's stuff. I mean, I'm not really heavily Christian, but some of those things make a lot of sense, And there was another incident where I was talking to Lizzie, and she said, "Oh, go and watch the football. There's a site. Go and watch the football. There's something that happens in the football that you'll be interested in." And I thought, in the football, she never liked football, and I was due to watch a match, so I came up and switched on the TV, and it was Liverpool were playing, and I thought, oh, I'll watch this. And of course, Liverpool, all the fans singing the Liverpool song, and it's "You'll Never Walk Alone." And I thought, oh, there we are. That's the message. You'll never walk alone.
You also have to be sort of keyed into these things, because sometimes it could just right over your head.
Yes.
It must be very frustrating if one believes in continuation of consciousness. It must be very frustrating for those on the other side to send you these messages, and sometimes you just don't connect with it.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure she sent me lots of messages I haven't picked up. Or you've got to be in that zone, which is very subtle. Where you just Suzanne said, "Oh, you just tune the TV set." You tune it, and that's when you start to get communication.
It's strange to me in that we have a universal human need or desire for belief in a supreme consciousness, a supreme being, a God, whatever you would like to refer to the supreme being as. But we have no real absolute positive proof, but we're willing to put our faith in that. But we seem to be reluctant to put our faith in things that really speak of other worlds and other dimensions and things like that. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes between the faith that we have in God, whether it's of whatever religion you subscribe to, and of another dimension or another world that we might transition to after our physical death. So,
well, I think there's a lot, about conditioning in there. We're conditioned to be a certain way and think in a certain way, as a child, and we're brought up a certain way, and we're not really thinking about those sort of things. We're conditioned to be practical, and
and get on with the real world, as it were.
Yeah, get a real job.
There's new clinical research into psychedelics that are really in the news quite a bit lately, with magic mushrooms, psilocybin. You mentioned your experience earlier with LSD, but wasn't particularly a great experience for you. In fact, it resulted in some really negative, things. But the research now into psilocybin, MDMA, and this other chemical that's actually in plants and animals, including in us, that you and I were talking about previously, called DMT.
Yes.
They reveal other dimensions of reality, but there's that controversy as to whether they actually do key us into these other dimensions, or whether they're just a function of pure brain chemistry as a reaction to these drugs. So it's an interesting
Yeah.
area of study.
I think it's important that you have a guide, that you're in a situation that's peaceful, and yeah, you feel very comfortable, and you have someone there with you that's guiding you through it. I think that's the answer. But I'm sure those things work.
Right, right. So you had experience with mediums. You had gone to some people like Suzanne and others that you had mentioned. Um, was that a very reaffirming experience? And did you find any contradictions amongst one medium to another?
Well, Suzanne always says, she always says, oh, a gold nugget. So when you pick up something really strongly, and you don't necessarily, sometimes you don't get so many gold nuggets. Gold nugget would be something that's very, very true about somebody. Um, and I guess some mediums are better than others, and some days are better than others. But yes, I went to quite a few different mediums, um, all on different levels. Some mediums were very down to earth. There was one near you, somewhere down south of you, down more in Virginia or somewhere. And she was the first one, and she was very good. She was like, oh yeah, yeah, oh yes, dear. I picked her up, and she's saying this, and she said a lot of true things. And most of the sessions I've been to have been very, very good.
I'm always,
With the
sorry. Yeah, I'm always impressed with the mediums that have that kind of approach about the woman you were just describing, that you're going them with a full heart of bereavement, and yet they're very kind of light, even though they're in the business of communicating with the dead. They're
Yes.
also had a medium that I rank very highly, who's in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, called Elizabeth Harrington. And she's just the sweetest, most optimistic and upbeat person that you can't help but feed off of that energy, even though she's telling you things that's kind of making you feel so many conflicting things inside, because you have this affirmation that she's giving you. I think she refers to it as like a validation. We're giving you a validation. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned to you before, Jim, that I'm a magician of many years with
Yes.
Circle.
Yes, you did.
So I'm kind of aware of things like cold reading and other techniques that some people do either for entertainment or as a sham. So I didn't really pick up anything on that level from this medium that I was just referring to. So what impressed me is just she was just so upbeat that you couldn't help but absorb that positive
And
energy.
did you get in touch with your wife?
Yes, very much so. I mean, to the point where she said, your wife's telling me, and this is something she says I hear mostly from the husbands. She says, Sheila's telling you she's sorry she didn't do more work around the house. And Sheila and I used to have these kind of sessions, nothing major, but just, loving disagreements about the fact that, I was doing the laundry and the hoovering, and I would sort of let her know about maybe we should have a little bit more equity in that. And this was brought out by this.
Yes.
So other things that definitely would never have been on the internet, and this was kind of pre-internet days as well. So The fact that Sheila also suffered from migraine, she picked up on that. She picked up on quite a number of very specific things. So it's a wonderful experience, I think. I mean, I think, a lot more from going to a good medium like her. And I think you might agree than I ever got like going to a clergy person, because um, I'm Jewish, Sheila's Catholic. So I went to everyone. I went to priests, I went to rabbis, I went to Indian chiefs, I went to anyone and everyone. But I got the most comfort, I think, from going to this particular medium, at any rate. So you and Lizzie had shared your pursuits of spiritual knowledge in many different ways. Can you talk a bit
Yeah.
about that?
Well, we'd gone through a quite a Buddhist thing. We were very interested in a Tibetan guru. Well, he was actually Indian, but he taught Tibetan Buddhism, and he was very entertaining because he spoke very good English, and he was very funny, and we followed him for a while because and we went on some retreats, to India and to China, and went around some of these beautiful monasteries and things, and but we spent a lot of time, and it was very mind expanding, suddenly going to somewhere like that. We went to China, and we went to Ladakh, which is north of India. That we had some great experiences. And in fact, when she did pass, I managed to get in touch with him, and apparently he did say some prayers. So I think he might have helped her. I think they're able to help in all these sort of things. When someone dies, I think they can help get them to the right place. And he was the sort of person who I know would look after you in that case. If you passed, I'm sure he would help. He would rescue you if you had any trouble, or not that I'm really worried, but I feel the fact that Lizzie's shown me all this stuff now. I feel better in myself about dying, because she sort of told me, she basically told me that you don't die anyway, and she'd be there, the same for you, Ken. Your wife would be there for you,
Yeah,
which is lovely.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's this talk as far as being shepherded or into the next dimension, if you like, and what it involves. And there's so much knowledge out there that, of course, is unprovable and it's not scientifically studied, except for some of these things that are going on, like that thing I mentioned earlier about that NYU study into near-death experiences, which I find is amazing. But there's so many stories that come back from hospice nurses, from
Yeah,
other
yeah,
that deal with the National Widowers Organization. We have many people on the board that are, in the hospice area, that have so much experience with death, that
yeah,
find that there's very common things that do occur to, in effect, I'll use the word shepherd you into the next realm, like seeing before you pass, seeing predeceased loved ones that are sort of in the room with you, um,
yeah,
and other
yeah,
things that you get. And supposedly it's a wonderful experience. It's difficult for us, the living that are on the material plane here on Earth, to deal with the loss of our loved ones, especially a spouse that we're so close to. Because I always thought spouses are a witness to our life. That's
yes,
it's
yeah.
there to guide us emotionally, spiritually, physically, and nutritionally in every way.
And
Uh,
you share so much with them, don't you? You know what I mean? You're sharing, and it's almost like you're sharing the energy. That you're in their energy, and uh, she's in your energy. You know what I mean? It's like so it's funny when they pass. It seems like they're still there's still something there.
Right, right. I wanted to talk about your experience with the Yardbirds, the popularity of Yardbirds hits like "Shape of Things," "Heart Full of Soul," "For Your Love." So you're touring very extensively, and as you mentioned in the book, you saw lots of road miles with bandmate Keith Relf, who you mentioned earlier, and got to know each other on a deeper philosophical level. Can you talk about your shared interest of spirituality and investigating the so-called unseen world with Keith?
Well, yeah, we spent a lot of time because we were, you know, we were working quite hard and traveling a lot, and we used to share rooms in those days, you know, to save money. So we spent a lot of time chatting and relaxing together, you know, and playing all sorts of weird and wonderful music. We used to take a record player around with us and all that. And of course, you know, have an occasional smoke, I guess, but that wasn't the main thing. We were just very interested in all that stuff, as I said before. You know, the chariots of the gods and the UFOs and Atlantis, and once you start getting into that, there's a lot of history, isn't there, that opens up, you know, in that respect.
Right.
And we were very close. We communicated well together.
I remember there was a song by, was it Graham Parsons, Waiting for the UFOs, if that rings a
Oh,
bell.
really? Yes.
There weren't that many songs about the you know, the sort of stuff like UFOs and things like that. Maybe I'm missing something, but how's the music and lyrics of the Yardbirds and Renaissance inspired by your shared interest with Keith in the spiritual world? Were there like,
Well, yes, I talked about one song which was called "Happenings 10 Years Time Ago,"
one of my
which was,
personal favorites?
yeah, which was one of it wasn't really a big hit because it was quite unusual. But we had Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck both playing on it. So I'm very proud of it. I thought it was a very, very well done record, you know. But Keith and I wanted to talk about, you know, having lived before, and so that comes into the lyrics, you know, meeting people you've known before, you know. I can't remember the lyrics now, but seemingly we've known before, and being in different, you know, a place that it's all very familiar. So we wanted to put that over, but of course it was well ahead of its time.
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
nobody really understood what we was talking about.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Jim, because that was on my notes to specifically talk about that song. That was always very affecting to me. You know, even from when it first came out, I didn't really get it. But the more I would, you know, with age and wisdom, you know, there was a deeper connection with that song through time. Did you ever have any conversations with the other band members like Eric Clapton or Jimmy Page about spirituality?
Well, yeah, not Clapton so much, but Jimmy Page was very interested in spirituality, but he was more he didn't speak about it very much. He was more involved with people like Aleister Crowley and sort of magic and all that stuff, which I don't know, we weren't so much interested in, you know, all the black and white magic and all that stuff. It was something we didn't want to go there. So he was obviously very interested, but he didn't talk about it very much.
Yeah, there was that period of time when he was kind of infamous for his interest in Aleister Crowley, and there was that bookshop. Was it on Charing Cross or the Strand or somewhere?
Yes, yes, that he owned. I think he owned the, yeah, and
Um,
he lived in his house as well. Was it called Headley Grange or somewhere? It was Crowley's house.
right, right. But that was also the time that the Stones were coming out with things like Sympathy for the Devil. So instead
Yes,
of using a platform for songs about enlightenment, there was kind of a little bit of a push, not a major push, to talk about things that were more of the dark side, especially with the Stones album. Oh gosh, help me out here, Jim. The album that was sort of
Oh, Beggar's Banquet.
it was the
Beggar's Bank.
Satanic Majesties.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I thought that was sort of a bit weird, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It was sort of a bit strange. That wasn't something I was really interested in.
No, that's sort of the dark side of the whole thing. I'm also curious, speaking of prominent people of the time that were involved in spirituality, whether it was on the dark side or the more enlightened side, did George Harrison have any influence or confirmation in your mind about the path that he was pursuing?
Well, it was nice. It was very nice. I think he was on a very nice path, wasn't he? But it was very Hare Krishna, wasn't it? You know, very Hindu. What is that? What is that religion? It is Hare.
Hindu, yeah, it's Hare Krishna. I'm pretty sure that was a Hindu cult. I maybe shouldn't use the word cult. I'm not sure, but that's correct. But
Yeah, it was sort of quite beautiful at the same time. You know, because I knew more about Buddhism, which was the other religion in India. There were the two of the main religions. Um, but they were very beautiful. And in fact, Godfrey Townsend, who plays the guitar in the band now, he's into the Hare Krishna, and he does chanting every morning, and it's sort of very nice actually. And he's a very gentle soul, and very he's got a nice energy about him.
yeah, yeah, brilliant guitar player as well.
Yes.
And a fellow New Yorker, I might add.
Yes, probably not far from you, Ken.
Pro flies, no. um, you described your affinity with France that you and Lizzie both shared, because I think you both kind of had an immediate attraction, a mutual attraction,
Yes, yes.
connection with a past life. And I think you mentioned either in the book or when we spoke previously about somebody calling up the fact that you might have been a monk, or if I got that possibly wrong.
Yeah, well, I probably was. I probably was a monk, but I've had some. Yes, I've had some, you know, past life regressions, and I've been you know, I've been like knight or something in France, or a soldier or something like that. I think I've had them before. There's a guy called Rob Schwartz, and he's very good, and he,
Many was that, oh, that's not Many Lives, Many Masters, and Weiss, but was Rob Schwartz your soul's plan? Was that?
yes, that's right. And he reckons that, you know, we plan our life before we come into it. And for instance, you know, Leslie and I might have planned what was going to happen before we were born as souls. And you know, for some reason, uh, you know, we knew that she was going to pass and I was going to be her carer. And that could be, you know, maybe that was reversed in another life. You know, so that's what Rob Schwartz talks about. Um, and it's very interesting because he's done a few books. Your Soul's Plan was one of them, with all these stories about how people are born with these life purposes, and seemingly they've planned it all already.
And it's all supposedly, from what I understand about my delving into the subject, it's all sort of voluntary. We sign on to this. It's all done with absolute consent of all the souls before
Yes,
back. I've always
yes.
an incredible pull, as I've mentioned to you, about the UK. You know, I'm basically I always joke that I'm a British guy trapped in an American's body type of thing.
Great.
Had this immediate affinity this the first time I touched down on English soil, and so many wonderful coincidences happened while I was living in the UK that it was too difficult for me to ignore that there was something that wasn't deep.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but it was confirmed by, well, confirmed, not scientifically, obviously, but by a medium who didn't know about my history with the United Kingdom. And she said quite definitively that I was British in at least one or a few other previous incarnations.
Oh, right. Okay. And
And
you lived in my neck of the woods, didn't you? You lived quite near where I was.
right around Kew and
Yeah.
Hampton and East Moseley and
Yeah. Sorry.
yep. No, I used to go play guitar in the back of Hampton Court Palace. I used to have a moped and strap the guitar around my back and
Oh,
went to
really? Yeah. Yeah.
play. I don't know if you're still allowed to do that now.
That's something else, that place, isn't it? Hampton Court Palace. That's amazing.
But as far as like threads, when I came to England, I eventually, through a series of circumstances, wound up living in Addlestone in Surrey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was the home of John Hawken, who you played with in
Yeah.
Renaissance.
Yeah.
And there's the connection to the band Renaissance, which I loved the band Renaissance in both its incarnations, yours and Keith and Jane and Lewis and John, and the more recent Renaissance with Mike Dunford and any.
Yes. Yeah.
Mike Dunford is also from Addlestone. So,
Yes.
and before I ever came to the UK, I wound up living next door to Mike Dunford's sister in a neighboring village to Addlestone. So,
Funny.
and you and I get to meet. So, how's that for threads? I mean, it's.
I know. I know. It's very funny.
So, let me just check through my notes here. Edit this part out. Just checking through notes is not. Yeah. All right. So actually, we've covered a few things. There's actually a song, speaking of Renaissance, Jim, there's a song, Things I Don't Understand, which you did with the original Renaissance, that
Yes.
the later incarnation of Renaissance with Annie Haslam and Mike Dunford did.
Yeah, that worked quite well, that song, didn't it? That's quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going round Mick's house, or Michael's house, and we wrote it round his house, wherever he was. I guess he was in Addlestone.
Yep. Yep. Well, I don't know if the Wimpy Bar is still there on the high street.
I shouldn't think so.
Still a few of them left.
Yes.
There's a photo towards the end of the book of Lizzie on a stone bridge that gave me goosebumps. Could you?
Oh, really? Yes. Yes. That was interesting. It's called it's not far from here. It's about 45 minutes drive from here, and it's called the Pont de Madame, which means the bridge of the woman, or the Madame's bridge. And yeah, we what gave you the goosebumps? The picture of the what's it called?
Astral. It sort of seemed like an astral image of Lizzie on the bridge. I believe it was taken. The picture was taken after she had passed.
Yeah, that's right. We took a picture of her when she was alive, because Lizzie and I used to love to go to this place. It was like an old sawmill, which was all a bit of a wreck, but there was a bridge over a river, and you could go down, walk by the river, and it was very, very beautiful. And then I went with some friends of mine a bit later after she passed, and when they took a photo of them standing where Lizzie was, and when we looked at the photos, it was taken with a camera, as opposed to a phone. That there was a big orb where Lizzie was originally in the picture, in her shot, in the previous shot. There was a great big green orb, you know, I don't know how. Can you explain that? Being a photographer, I mean,
I've seen spirit orbs in some of the photos shortly after Sheila passed as well. So no, I have no explanation. And some people could say it's dust on the lens, and that can account for some of those things. But beyond that, it doesn't really resolve into any kind of speck of dust. It really there's almost like an energy field.
yes,
Amazing sound to some. There's actually, if you blow up, enlarge that particular section, which is, you know, fairly small on the picture, and you really do see kind of like an energy field within this round.
yes. I'm glad you asked me that one because I've forgotten about that, and that was a real good one.
Yeah, these are things that, you know, I suppose maybe some widowers are not keen to talk about because they think they might be laughed at or disbelieved, or just thinking, well, it's the grief that's weighing so heavily that they're imagining these things, or they want to believe it. But I think we also have to give some credence to the idea that, you know, these things could speak to a wider reality than our five senses.
Exactly. And I've seen videos of orbs traveling around, you know, going around the room. I've seen someone take a home video of these things traveling around the room.
Right.
So I think there's definitely something to them.
There's a question you asked towards the end of the book also, is, did I try hard enough? Do you think that's a question that plagues every widower?
I'm sure. Yes, I'm sure. You know, I think you go through a big guilt thing and think, oh, did I do the right thing? And you know, I've looked at some of because she was very strict on her diet, and she had all sorts of, you know, different doctors working with her and alternative doctors, and then I've realized that most of the time she was probably eating the wrong food, you know. Uh, uh, Now, I mean, there's been more advanced study with diet, isn't there? And you know, things like carbohydrates and things are not necessarily that good for you. And I think she was probably um, eating the wrong food, and I sort of regret that. But of course, there's nothing I could do about it, you know. And another thing people always say to me, oh, don't get guilty because it was her time. You know, it was planned, and it was her time to go, and there was nothing you could do.
Right.
You know, you did everything you could.
I think sometimes we as humans, part of what's built into our system is that sometimes we're pretty good at beating ourselves up with regret, that even, as you say, there's nothing really practically, intellectually, that we know that we couldn't have done much more than that we did. We were there to be a rock, a support,
Exactly. Yeah.
just, you know, to try our best to get through that situation, whether it was cancer or stroke or any other malady that resulted in their death, to try to get them through it and back to health as best as we could, you know.
Yeah, and I always think, I would do it again. You know, if I had it, not something I regret. I would always be there again if I had to. You know what I mean?
Well, being a caretaker, I mean, we can't experience obviously what our spouse or our loved ones went through, what their experience is, but being the caretaker is very demanding, draining, psychically, emotionally, spiritually. It
Yeah.
requires an enormous amount of marshaling of strength and energy. So I
Yes.
all the widowers out there watching us, watching this, you know, uh, you did great, you did good, you did the best you could. So, but
Definitely. And I think there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of reflection in that coming from my wife, you know, from Lizzie. I think she's very thankful about it. That's the feeling I get, you know, and she's very grateful to me for what I did.
I wish we had more time.
Yeah, it's a natural.
So many
It's
things
an It's a natural, Ken.
Yeah, but I wanted to talk about what projects you have. I know you recently wrapped up a tour with the new Yardbirds, and what else have you got coming up?
Well, I think the main project is quite interesting because I decided to do like a legacy show. I think people are starting to do that now, where I do much more talking. I still work with the band, but I talk through the band's history, and there's a lot of interesting history that people would like to know about. So I talk through the history, and we have various back projection and pictures going on, and sort of multimedia sort of stuff, and have the band play a song that's relevant to the history, and then go through, and then end up playing a few great songs all together. So in a way, I think it's very interesting. I can talk through the sort of script, and also I don't have to play so much, which is quite good at my age now.
Drummers always get the brunt of the physicality in any band, obviously.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
But you're not just
so,
you're also a producer, songwriter, singer, a guitar player. You're a quintuple threat, or even.
well, yes, I like to do everything. Like to sing and play acoustic and do all that stuff.
Well, Jim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with us here for this podcast for the National Widowers Organization.
Oh, great.
Appreciate your time, and it was great seeing you, although this time it was a little further away than in the first. And I would love to continue the conversation, but
Of course, anytime.
and I would certainly encourage our viewers to pick up a copy of Jim's book, She Walks in Beauty. It's available on Amazon and fine booksellers everywhere. So, but thank you much for your time, and wishing you all the best. And I look forward to seeing that the tour that you were just mentioning. I would love to have come and see.
Great. Okay, Ken. Thank you very much.